Hello everyone, today we will discuss the excitation of DC machine. In this lecture, we discuss the excitation of DC machine and its types. So before going to discuss the excitation of DC machine, one question from my side: when magnetic flux create in a coil? All of you agree with me, when the current pass through the coil, then the magnetic flux create in them or surrounding of the coil, right? In DC machine, if we see the inner part of the DC machine, in the field side we can see there have this type of coils. When current pass through this coil, then the magnetic flux is created in them and the flux move on north side to south side, right? So let's see excitation. What is the excitation of DC machine, right? We can see in DC machine the magnetic flux is produced by field coils carrying current, right? When current flow through the coil, then the magnetic flux is created. Then we can see in DC machine, to generate magnetic flux by passing current in the field winding is called excitation. That means in DC machine, to generate magnetic flux, we are passing current in the field winding. This process is called excitation of DC machine. Then we will talking about the excitation types, right? There are two types of excitation. One is separate excitation and two is self excitation. Then we will discuss step by step what is separate excitation and what is self excitation. Now we will discuss the separate excitation in DC machine. So in the term separate excitation, we can easily understand the field winding energized by a separated DC source. So we can see what is separate excitation. In DC machine, if the field coil energized by a separated DC source, it's called separate excitation. We can see this is a separated excited DC generator and this is a separated excited DC motor diagram. We can see in the separate excited DC generator, the field winding energized by a separated DC source. Similar as in DC motor, the field winding of the motor is energized by a separated DC source, right? Now we will discuss the self excitation of DC machine. Self excitation, this term we can easily understand the machine armature and field winding supply current are same, right? We can see. So let's see what is the self excitation of DC machine. In DC machine, if the current flowing through the field winding is supplied by the machine itself, then it is called self excitation, right? So we can see this is the self excited DC generator and this is the self excited DC motor. So you can see in this diagram, DC self excited DC generator diagram, we can see the supply current or voltage of in DC in the DC machine, armature and field supply current or voltage is similar as self excited DC motor. In the DC machine, we can see in armature and field winding have a same DC supply, right? Okay, thank you.